Wants to be a part of your day, Kevin Miller in the morning. Don't forget your chance to win our Metallica tickets. That's right. Caller 20 when you hear, when you hear the Metallica hit coming back, Ray Amaya's Choice. Between now and 8:59, caller 20 wins at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. But you have to hear the Metallica song, and that'll be time to call. Joining us now, our great friend, Dr. Lamero, is with us again. Make America Great Again and Again. Dr. Lamero, thank you for joining us.
I am doing great. It's great to be with you. I always enjoy your show.
So, Dr. Lamero, the president's had a busy couple days talking about firearms and talking about tariffs. What's the good news in that?
Oh, well, there's a lot of good news. I think it's great to open dialogues. I think that people take him too seriously in terms of every word he says is precisely what he means. I think most of the things he talks about are opening dialogues in a negotiation because I think that's his style. And people say, oh, he said this, he said that, and they get real excited. And in reality, that isn't what's going to happen. You know, it's like, this is my position on the negotiating. Let's hear yours. Let's go back and forth. And let's talk about it. And I think his reality TV show where he brings in the press to actually listen to some of these negotiations is a little bit hard for people to stomach because they take every word he says as literal final answer. That's just not his style, and they don't understand it.
Your thoughts when the president taking a look at taking on the NRA and possibly taking a look at due process. We've been talking about that quite a long time. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thought is he's not taking on due process. I think he sort of kind of rolls it up into a ball and said that, you know, we take away the guns, we put off due process. I think he really didn't mean that. I honestly think this is all part of that same style that he uses. It gets people's attention. It gets people talking. But ultimately, he doesn't follow through on some of these things because, let's face it, due process is due process. It's part of our whole constitutional style. You know, everybody has to have due process. You can't eliminate that. And you can't just go in and have the government take away everybody's arms and, you know, all of their weapons and then later on take them to court and find a reason. I mean, that's called dictatorship. That's not due process. So I don't think he meant it the way it was taken. He says things, and I think people, as I mentioned a minute ago, you know, take it very literally, and I don't think he intends it that way at all.
Right. On the other hand, though, if Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton had said it, wouldn't we be up in arms?
Well, those people, when they said things, they meant it.
I just love it when you said those people. That was great.
Yeah, well, they are those. You know, I mean, they're the other side, you know, for conservatives. I'm a conservative. I will agree with that. And but no, I think they did things. I mean, Obama has a track record of unconstitutional actions, executive orders that were clearly unconstitutional, including the DACA one that Trump rescinded. In the courts, they're trying to go to court to protect an unconstitutional action. Boy, if that isn't a case.
Indeed. Of course, we still have the DACA, though. Yeah,
thanks to the courts. But
right.
I think if it ever gets to the Supreme Court, it'll be knocked out because I don't see how you can justify it constitutionally.
Right, but when we take a look at the DACA and everything else, why can't the president just say it's unconstitutional and we're out? He gave the...
He did.
Well, he punted it to Congress, and Congress hasn't done anything.
Well, yeah, but his action he took, which made all the sense in the world, to basically issue an executive order to override a previous executive order, which was unconstitutional, clearly, okay? But the way the left operates today is when they don't win an election, they rant and rave and throw a temper tantrum, and when the president does something, they take him to court. No matter what it is, they take him to court, and then eventually he wins.
Right.
He won the wall debate. That lawsuit he won. But a lot of these lawsuits take time to go through the courts, and that's the left's tactic, is you slow down the president's progress by doing that. By the way, though, let me mention a Heritage Foundation report that came out this week that listed 334 different conservative objectives that Trump should have in his administration based on what he said, what they think, because they're a conservative think tank. And at this time, with those same 334 different types of objectives, Reagan had accomplished 49%. Trump has accomplished 64%. He's actually on track to do a lot of good things, but the left keeps getting in his way.
Indeed, the left continues to get in his way. So, how do you see what's going on in the White House? You're going to love this, Dr. Lamero. You've been around, and all of a sudden these new news organizations prop up this Axios, which I don't think really was around 2 or 3 years ago. Now that's the source saying there's a war within the White House and Mueller's on the warpath.
Oh, that's a common thing that's said during presidencies, that, that the staff is at war with each other. I will say there is kind of an ongoing, I try to be honest about all of this and present both sides, although definitely from a conservative point of view. There is always a war in the White House between people who are nudging their career forward and trying to push themselves ahead and look a little bit better than some other staff members. There's sort of a rivalry. It's a competition. Who gets the president's ear? Who gets the attention? Who gets the next bonus or raise or better job or whatever, however it plays out? So there is that kind of thing going on. There's also a tremendous number of attacks on his staff by the left because they're trying to, create their own discord and chaos there to once again to resist him. Remember, their whole methodology here is resistance. Their whole policy is resist Trump, and that's what they're all about. They'd love to impeach him if they could. By the way, those Russians who were indicted a couple of weeks ago, in the indictment, which I read, by the way, kind of interesting to read it, they said that the Russians were trying to sow discord. So they were trying to plant the seeds of chaos and discord in our political system, and I don't think they did at all. But it's the same thing the Democrats are doing. They're trying to sow discord in our government because they didn't win.
Indeed. So who has the president's back?
Well, actually, I think a lot of his family members do. I think they're trying to protect him because they're used to working with him, and they all trust each other. I think Kelly, in a sense, is trying to protect him from a lot of things. I think there are a number of folks in the Freedom Caucus that want to see him succeed. I think that there are a lot of Republicans at RNC that want him to succeed because they don't want to see the presidency lost, and they don't want to see the House or Senate lost this year in the congressional election.
Now, Dr. Lamero, if people want to get a hold of you, what can they do?
Well, you can always go to greatnewsforamerica.com. Greatnewsforamerica.com was the name of my fourth book. It's also the name of my website. And there's about 150 pages of information on my website. So it's packed with lots of information, writings, my weekly articles. And there's even a little blurb about my book that launches next Tuesday. My fifth book, More Great News for America, will be out. It's actually available on Amazon if somebody wants to buy it ahead of time. But officially, it gets launched next week.
So finally, what should we be looking out for as far as some good news in the upcoming months?
Well, the country continues to become more conservative. The left becomes more and more unhinged and delusional. But the good news is that people are swallowing the red pill. Remember the red pill from the Matrix, where if you wanted truth, you swallowed the red pill? Well, it turns out...
hold on. I use that on my wife all the time. I should have taken the blue pill.
Oh, well, I'll leave that between you and your wife, which pill to take. But at any rate, there are a lot of people taking the red pill who are former Democrats. And the funny thing for me in my trend watching and looking at numbers is that there are a lot of Democrats who are supporting Trump. He's picking up support from, of all places, big government, people that used to be moderate Democrats who have lost the moderate Democratic Party to the real progressive, left-wing, almost socialist communist types, the ones who are really radical, the Antifa types, the anti-freedom of speech types. And so the good news is that the country is recognizing some of the abuses of the left and are moving in a more conservative manner or direction.
And Dr. Lamero, one more time, that website if people want to get your new book or find out what you're up to.
Yeah, well, it's greatnewsforamerica.com. I do an article normally every Monday. Once in a while, I throw in another article during the week. And the new book, More Great News for America, is available. It's my best book. It is optimistic. It is really going to blow some people's socks off when they read it.
All right, Dr. Lamero, don't be a stranger, okay?
No. Well, have me back. We'll talk about the book next time.
Roger that. Take care, Dr. Lamero.
All right. Have a great day.
You too. All right, let's go to Big John. Big John, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Big
I
John.
I just wanted to comment regarding Trump bringing back the tariffs. I think one of his best traits is that he's proactive and does what he believes is right, regardless of the consequences. So I love the fact that he wants to help the steel and aluminum industry, and thus, kind of help revive our manufacturing base. What do you think?
Look, I'm all in favor of it. You have the ne'er-do-wells that, continue to rip the president. And look, when we believe he's wrong, we're going to hold him accountable like we did the other day without due process when he's talking about getting rid of due process. But I have long been a fan of America First, of bringing back the steel, and of employing Americans. To me, there's nothing nobler than the American middle class that we have allowed, not only allowed, but we've encouraged to be destroyed.
Right. And, Blair's argument notwithstanding, I'm sure he does have probably a point or two to make there. And I don't know, I haven't researched that. So he's obviously on to, some good argument. But, in the long run, we can't, we got to have a strong manufacturing base. And if it means that costs go up, now, that's just something we got to deal with. And I think that Blair's saying that, okay, well, maybe he can do subsidies or something. That's government subsidies are messing with the economy, or amount to the government messing with the economy, in my view. And, the economy should run with as little government interference as possible. And, the government just flat needs to get out of the way. And sometimes, you just have to, costs go up. Well, that's life. Deal with it. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth for today. So I love your show, Kevin. Take care.
Big John, we appreciate you listening. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. And don't forget, coming up this hour, your chance to win tickets to Metallica. Well, look who walked in, our great friend David Ripley, joining us from Idaho Chooses Life. You were just in the area? Is that right?
Yeah, my friend Bob has me roped in, so I thought I'd do a twofer today.
I see. You're a multimedia personality, are you?
Well, I guess. I don't know. But I couldn't resist the temptation to see you, live and in person.
Yes, I know. There's a lot to say for my wardrobe by Walmart. So
you bet. You are a dashing figure. If people only knew.
Indeed. David Ripley, let's talk a little bit about, before we get into this very important issue that brings you to our doorstep, a lot of things going on. You have been involved in politics in Idaho for how many years?
About 30, I think.
30. When we're talking about the race for Congress, the race for all the state offices, the race for all the state Senate and representative offices, have you ever seen a year that compares to this when we're talking about a lot of turnover? Because you have a lot of folks that are either retiring or trying to get higher office. Your thoughts?
No, I think I tumbled a couple of months ago to the fact that this is like the mother of all primaries coming up here. You have a generational change, I think, coming to the State House, starting with the governorship, potentially, and I think you're looking at substantial turnover in the legislature. There are a number of senior members of that body that are not running again. There's a whole crop of people that are running for higher office. I think we're going to see potentially a transformative election.
Indeed, especially when we're talking about the legislature and perhaps a turnover in leadership. David Ripley joining us from Idaho Chooses Life. Kevin Miller in the morning here. Our time is 8:24. So when we take a look at these races, now granted, you hear a lot of things. So the first congressional district, those candidates are rolling. And again, we don't. I guess they have the filing season hasn't opened up, or it will open up soon. That's a pretty big one. People are comparing this to either 2010 or when then an unknown Bill Sally won. Is this because this field is so open? Does it feel like that to you, or is this a kind of a different field, this race?
Well, with the number of candidates you have, I think they are all busy establishing themselves, their name identification. My guess is that most people, if they are starting to pay attention to elections, they're paying attention to the governor's race, primarily because we got so much TV going on already. Ahlquist defined that race, a year ago through a very aggressive direct mail program. I think the first CD is just starting to come into people's focus, and probably behind that would be the lieutenant governor's race, as people begin to, realize that I think we're under 80 days away from that primary election.
When we're taking a look at the factors, Richard Ben Kramer wrote the preeminent book on politics called What It Takes, and it was an example of I believe it was the 1984 presidential primary. What does it take to get elected? Is it money? Is it money? Is it more than money?
Well, money matters. Anytime I hear a candidate tell me that he's being outspent, 3-1 by his opponent, but he's going to work harder than that guy, generally you're looking at a guy who's getting ready to lose, right? But I actually believe that messaging is much more important than money. In fact, I think messaging drives money and eventually drives, a winning, campaign. And by messaging, I mean being able to meet voters where they live. And, I'm a big believer in representative democracy. I believe in being able to figure out what people think, what they think their government should be doing for them, and responding to that. And when you get into questions about leadership and how to lead versus how to follow, your constituents, that gets kind of complicated. But the heart of our governmental system is being responsive to the people who pay the bills. And candidates who are able to get in touch with those folks who like people, who like real people, who share those values, conservative values, especially in the first CD, I think generally speaking in Idaho, and connect with people and are genuine, they can overcome a lot of difficulties in terms of establishment of credentials or even name ID, and even money disadvantages.
Traffic and weather together at KIDO Talk Radio. David Ripley, I don't know if this is Metallica's goodbye tour. That's a very good question.
It's hard to keep
you big Metallica fan?
No.
Neither am I.
I'm a slower, older kind of guy, I guess.
Frank
Sinatra's pretty good. Elton John's pretty good.
This is a culture class here. We're having Frank Sinatra and Elton John while we're giving away Metallica tickets on KIDO
that's
Talk
bad.
Radio.
That's bad, probably.
I don't know. I'm trying to think. Music today is just so very different than the older days when people actually played instruments.
Yes.
I suppose country music, they still play instruments, right?
Yeah, a little bit. Some lyrics going on there still. That's good.
Right. Or as my dad says, country and western. He hasn't. Anyway, let's examine the Idaho legislature before we get to the big issue of life, which is why you're here. Your review and commentary on the Idaho legislature: no grocery tax, big tax cut. I don't know who it's going to favor. Just passed the Senate. Have our folks that you work with all the time been representative of the people that elected them? Your thoughts? There's a loaded question.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
Well, David Ripley said.
Well, let's step into this, right?
Yes.
So, I guess I'm surprised by some of the spending that's going on, which I think is kind of extraordinary. Really, we're looking at a second year of almost double-digit spending increases.
Well, we're getting a lot of money coming in.
Well, there's the problem.
Remember the old rainy day fund when it ran out?
Right.
It took us a while to pay the taxes, the tax returns?
Well, and so I predict, the tax cut is a down payment, but the fact is you're looking at a $300 million surplus, plus they raised taxes by $100 million when they did the conformity, so that gets you to $400 million. That's before you even start looking at growth in the economy. So they cut taxes by $200 million, which leaves a boatload of money for next year for spending increases, which I don't know. Those institutions just prove over and over again that if the money's there, it's going to get spent. So
Right.
That's all I can say about that, probably.
That's where you're going. What, are you running for office? You're afraid
No.
to offend anybody here today?
I'm still in the middle of the legislative session and trying to get some work done.
How quick is this one going? We figured it would be expedited because of the ultra-competitive campaign cycle. Do you see that happening?
It's been a very intense session, and I don't know if they're going to get out before the end of March, but the dynamic is there that that could happen.
All right. David Ripley, our great friend from Idaho Chooses Life, before we get to this big issue facing the legislature, and we do want to talk about life, and we'll take your phone calls after the Metallica people win their tickets or don't win their tickets. Governor Otter, the Hulk Hogan of Idaho politics, the last run of the Great Butch. Now, there have been some people that have, I don't know who I'm talking about, maybe Kevin Miller, who've been critical of the governor, and, a little petty because we don't have the governor on. But he's been a great champion of life that you've advocated and said, look, sometimes he doesn't get credit for that.
I think it's going to prove to be his lasting and greatest legacy to Idaho. By far, he signed more pro-life legislation into law than any governor in history. And more than that, it's all the behind-the-scenes stuff that I really appreciate about Governor Otter and his people. They have never fooled around with me in our work in the legislature. They've never undercut us. They've given us a free hand to persuade legislators of the policy and the bill, merits. And he's always given us a fair crack when we get those bills to his desk. And, people don't talk much about that and recognize that he has been a very faithful person about defending life and the core values of Idaho, I think. And in my opinion,
when it comes to life, will he be a tough act to follow?
I think he will be a very difficult act to follow. I think he's going to be remembered, certainly in my circles, as a great champion for life. And to me, that's the most important thing. Money comes, money goes. This policy goes, that policy works, this thing doesn't, that road gets built or doesn't. But you're talking about the fundamentals of valuing human life, and I think he's done a tremendous job in that area.
Where are we with the election of Donald Trump? We have an update every year with the great banquet at Eagle Christian Church with Idaho Chooses Life. But where are we when it comes to the Trump administration after 8 years of Obama and 8 years of Bush before that?
He has exceeded every reasonable expectation of what we could hope for in a president. I think what's unique about Donald Trump on the life issue in particular is that he's certainly not the first pro-life president we've had. I have a soft spot in my heart for George Bush. I think W had a tremendous heart for the life question. But what's unique about Donald Trump is that he actually has a pro-life administration. It's not merely that he would sign legislation that got to his desk. It's not merely that he talks about life issue from time to time. The fact is his administration is actually going through trying to find ways to advance the life issue from top to bottom. His Department of Health and Human Services has been, I'm just stunned by how much he's been able to change the tone and complexion of that department, which is, been the bane of my existence and the bane of the pro-life community's existence for decades. And the fact is they are beginning to implement policies that are actually championing life, trying to advocate life. They're in the middle of a program of trying to revamp this, I think it's a $280 million program on dealing with teen pregnancy rates. And they have shut Planned Parenthood off, including the Idaho affiliate of Planned Parenthood, stopped funding that organization and are reshifting those priorities to try to encourage pro-life pregnancy centers to apply for those grant monies to see if they can start talking to kids about abstinence and sound faith-based lifestyles, which we know works.
David Ripley joining us, Idaho Chooses Life, idahochooseslife.org, with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio. So what brings you to the old broadcast center today, dear friend?
Well, we had an important victory this week. We got one of our bills passed the House by a pretty large margin, and I wanted to share some good news, but I'm also hearing kind of a panic.
Well, before we get to that, we have our friend who's, I think, en route, so we don't want him to. I think grab those headphones over there. I think, David, if we have him over there, our great friend Tea Party Bob. Tea Party Bob, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Good.
Well, I just wanted to chime in a little bit here. As far as Trump goes, I still stand by what I said the other day. I think he misspoke, and again, 65% of the things he promised he did in the first year. So I'm definitely going to give him the benefit of the doubt. As for the discussion about gun rights and shootings goes, we all continue to discuss the bump stocks and who's responsible for the shootings in Parkland. Well, we're talking about mass shootings right here. In our own legislature, we have a group of supposedly conservative Republican legislators trying to pass Bill HB 563, which authorizes the legislators to take $29 million of our tax money and give it to Planned Parenthood to perform abortions. While we're discussing how to save the children from mass shootings, our legislators, like Representatives Wood, Kelly Packer, and Christy Perry, are busy giving our tax money to Planned Parenthood. And we all know this organization is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of unborn kids. The other day, I talked about how we've taken God out of our schools and how we've taught our children that abortion is okay. I said society needs to change if we want to see any change in our children's ethical and moral standards. Now here, we're allowing our legislators to pass a bill that will allow the killing of hundreds of unborn children financed by our tax dollars. Shouldn't we be asking the question, what is the difference in allowing gun-free zones or giving our tax money to Planned Parenthood to perform abortion? It's as simple as that.
Well, don't drive and talk at the same time. So we'll talk to you later.
Thank you very much, my friend. You have a great day, and you too, David.
All right, there we have it. Our great friend Tea Party Bob. So we have some good news, and we have some not so good news when we're talking about the legislature and the life issue, sir.
Right. In fact, Bob just referenced it. Probably, well, one or two of the worst bills I've seen in the 20-some years I've been down at the legislature has just popped up this week. It came out of the House Health and Welfare Committee. It's House Bill 563. It seeks a Medicaid expansion and waiver to create a $29 million fund to deal with so-called family planning. And it would provide new family planning services to women in the so-called Medicaid gap. $29 million that would pay for birth control and condoms and so forth and so forth, and would primarily be a windfall for Planned Parenthood. The fact that money came, that funding bill came out of the House Health and Welfare Committee, I think on an 8-3 vote this week. It's now on the House floor, and we've been scrambling for the last 2 days trying to collect the votes to kill that legislation on the House floor.
Now, here I thought we were conservative, Republican, and pro-life in Idaho.
Well, I got to tell you, this situation has rattled me a little bit. We brought legislation this session, House Bill 572, to defund Planned Parenthood, which is in the House Health and Welfare Committee. I cannot get a hearing on that bill, but that same chairman and that same committee passed legislation to provide a $29 million windfall to Planned Parenthood.
So wait a minute. In Idaho, we have David Ripley trying to get a bill to defund Planned Parenthood. In Republican Idaho, they won't give you a hearing, but then in conservative, pro-life Idaho, the same committee wants to fund Planned Parenthood 8-3?
That is apparently the facts of the story, yes. As I sit here today, that's where we're at. The fact is we only had 3 no votes in that committee on legislation being sponsored by the Democrat leader in the House, by the way, Matt Erpelding, who is, I think, carrying a big bucket of water for Planned Parenthood. And I don't know how he got a hearing in a Republican committee. And
How did he get a hearing?
Yes.
And you didn't get a hearing?
Yes, when I can tell you that the vast majority of Idahoans would love to see their tax dollars stop funding this organization, which has done more to undermine the family, more to undermine the values of Idaho. And, that organization may operate legally, but we are under no requirements to use our tax dollars to finance their operations. And so in the middle of that discussion, up comes this bill, which I knew nothing about until it actually passed the committee.
It was the Erpelding surprise.
It was a big surprise that caught us all off guard. And the fact is we had a number of Republicans in that committee vote for this bill. And I am just dumbstruck. It's kind of rattled.
Well, who are the Republicans that voted for the bill? Are you willing to out them here?
Sure. I think it's important that people know.
That voted to fund Planned Parenthood.
Yes. Starts with the chairman, Fred Wood, the vice chairman, Kelly Packer, who was a candidate for lieutenant governor, Representative Christy Perry, who was a candidate for for Congress in the 1st Congressional District, Representative Eric Redmond from Coeur d'Alene also voted for it, and I'm particularly disappointed about that vote because we have supported him for years as an organization, and I know he has pro-life values, but for some reason they blew a lot of smoke in the room on this bill, and they have convinced them that somehow this money won't end up in Planned Parenthood, and somehow this won't help finance their operations, and somehow it's not going to lead to, the social and political disaster that it obviously will.
More with David Ripley next, 580-5436, 580-KIDO, plus what you can do to help save the life issue here in Idaho. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And this just in, Andy in Caldwell, congratulations. You won our pair of Metallica tickets to go see them at Taco Bell Arena in November. David Ripley joining us from Idaho Chooses Life, idahochooseslife.org. So, David, for people listening right now, shocked that Republicans voted for this bill that will fund Planned Parenthood here in Idaho, what would you ask them to do?
Well, the fact is this is a pretty urgent matter. That bill is now on the House floor. I believe we're looking at a vote as early as Monday, and we need people to call the Idaho legislature and ask their state representative to vote no on that bill.
And what's the number?
The bill number is House Bill 563. 563.
And when we take a look at, do you think, obviously you're worried about it passing the House, right?
Yes, I am. If you'd have talked to me about something like this 2 weeks ago, I would have said this would never happen, especially in the Idaho House. It's not even I've never seen anything like this, okay? And the fact that it came out of that committee with that kind of a vote has actually kind of rattled me. I've begun to wonder if I know those folks down there as well as I thought I did. And I
And
guess
you're pretty restrained when you have you on here. It takes me a while to actually have to bait you into something here. So,
well, the fact is, I'm very concerned about it. I'm rattled by the fact that this bill has gotten as far as it has. Especially at a time where I think most conservatives and most Idahoans have tuned into the fact that we have got to stop funding Planned Parenthood, and so we're at work on that. We're at work on trying to get our congressional delegation to get Congress, off its fat behind. And here comes this bill saying we're going to put $29 million of new money into reproductive health care services. It really is flabbergasting to me.
yeah, especially in election season and when we have so many other needs, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's schools, or what have you.
Absolutely. And the fact is, if you were going to look at providing health care services to people in the Medigap population, is this actually $29 million going to pay for birth control pills and condoms? Is that the most pressing need for these folks who may not have health insurance or access to the state insurance exchange? And to me, it's just insanity.
More coming up with David Ripley. First, traffic and back with David Ripley here from Idaho Chooses Life. You want to say something?
Well, we were just looking at some of the math of this, right? So we were looking at the cost of Planned Parenthood birth control pills for a month is apparently about $12.
Right.
That's about $144 a year per woman, right? $29 million to buy $144 worth of birth control pills, right? The math works out. You could supply free birth control pills to over 200,000 women. The Medigap, nobody has ever claimed that there is such a Medigap population in the state of Idaho, right? So I'm thinking, aside from every other issue, how did these Republicans vote for such a fiscally irresponsible piece of legislation? I don't have an answer. All I have are questions. But I plead with your audience to pick up the phone and leave a message for their legislator, because this is a very serious problem.
And again, the legislators that voted for this?
We have Representative Fred Wood, Representative Kelly Packer, Representative Christy Perry, Representative Eric Redmond.
And Matt Erpelding.
And he's the sponsor of the bill, the Democrat minority leader.
From Boise.
From Boise.
Mm-hmm. Anything else we should be looking out for here?
Well, on the good front, I just wanted to finish the story, but we did get a bill passed through the Idaho House just yesterday that would require, for the first time in history, reporting on the complications that women suffer from abortions. And frankly, the more I've worked on this issue, the more important it's become, because it turns out that virtually everything we think we know about abortion, the procedure, the safety of the procedure, is data that's given to us by Planned Parenthood. 45 years into the abortion regime, we actually don't have any independent information about the health consequences, the psychological risks that women suffer after they choose abortion. So this new system is going to be statewide. It requires any medical provider that deals with a woman who is dealing with health risk problems to file a report with the department. And I think over the next several years, we're going to learn a tremendous amount about how risky and dangerous this is for women.
David Ripley, IdahoChoosesLife.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.